Everyone feared the giant mountain man, until the fattest one 6-year-old bought him and did. The dusty street fell silent when the cage door swung open. A beast of a man, scarred, chained, hated by all, stood face to face with a girl the whole town mocked. She had nothing but a pouch of silver and a trembling voice. Yet in that moment, she held the power to change both their lives forever. The townsfolk laughed. The sheriff spat. But when she set him free, whispers turned to fear because no one knew what would come next. Why would a girl despised as worthless dare to claim the most dangerous man alive? And what secret did she carry that could bring down the richest land baron in the territory? As fires burn, chains rattle, and water runs dry. When mercy and fear collide, who will truly be set free? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. Amanda May's heart thundered in her chest as she stood before the wooden platform where the cage Saturday. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, making the dust sparkle like tiny diamonds around her feet. She could feel every eye in town boring into her back, hear the whispers and snickers rippling through the crowd. The mountain man they called Ephraim Boone didn't move, didn't even look up. His massive frame seemed too large for the cage, shoulders hunched forward, dark hair falling across his face. The chains on his wrists clinked softly when he breathed. Amanda's fingers clutched the worn leather pouch that held her mother's savings, all she had left in the world. "Well, girl?" Sheriff Morton's voice dripped with mockery. "You sure about this foolishness? Last chance to back out and let someone proper bid on you instead." He dangled the iron keys, making them dance and catch the light. Amanda lifted her chin, though her voice quavered. "I've paid fair and square, Sheriff. The bill of sale is mine." More laughter erupted from the crowd. Someone called out, "The fat girl's gone and bought herself a killer." Another voice added, "Two freaks, perfect match." The words stung, but Amanda forced herself to stand straighter, the way her mother had taught her. The worn Bible in her apron pocket pressed against her hip like a reminder of strength. She reached for the keys with a hand that only trembled slightly. Sheriff Morton jerked them back. "Now see here, girl. This here's a dangerous man. Killed 3 men up in the high country, so they say. You got no business. The law says he's mine now." Amanda cut in, surprising herself with her firmness. "I paid $30 in silver, same as was asked. Now give me those keys." A hush fell over the crowd. Even the saloon keeper, Mr. Dawson, who'd been bidding to buy Amanda moments ago, stood slack-jawed at her tone. The sheriff's face darkened like a thundercloud. For the first time, the mountain man stirred. His head lifted slightly, and Amanda caught a glimpse of eyes the color of winter sky through the tangled hair. They fixed on her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. 30 pieces of silver," someone muttered from the crowd, "just like Judas paid." Amanda's cheeks burned, but she kept her hand extended. "The keys, Sheriff, please." With a disgusted grunt, Sheriff Morton slapped the heavy iron keys into her palm. They were warm from the sun and slick with his sweat. "Your funeral, girl. Don't come crying to me when he snaps your neck." Amanda's legs felt like water as she climbed the 3 wooden steps to the platform. The boards creaked under her feet. Up close, the cage smelled of unwashed man and old blood. Ephraim Boone remained motionless, but she could feel his eyes tracking her every move. Her hands shook so badly she could barely fit the key into the lock. The mechanism was stiff, resisting her efforts. Someone in the crowd started a slow clap, mocking her struggles. Tears of frustration pricked at her eyes. "Turn it to the left." A deep voice rumbled, so quiet she almost missed it. It was the first time she'd heard the mountain man speak. His voice was like distant thunder, rough from disuse. Amanda swallowed hard and did as he said. The lock clicked open. The crowd drew back as one when she swung the cage door wide. Even the sheriff took several steps backward, his hand moving to rest on his gun belt. The silence was absolute, broken only by the creak of the cage's hinges and the soft jingle of chains. Ephraim Boone unfolded himself slowly, like a great bear waking from hibernation. Standing at his full height, he towered over Amanda, his shadow falling across her like a blanket. The chains between his wrists caught the sunlight. Up close, she could see the scars that marked his face and hands, speaking of a hard life in the wilderness. Amanda had to crane her neck to look up at him. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Sir, would you come with me, please?" Those winter sky eyes studied her face for a long moment. Amanda forced herself to meet his gaze, though her heart was trying to beat its way out of her chest. She saw something flicker in those eyes, confusion, perhaps, or wonder. Finally, he gave a slight nod. "As you wish, miss." His first step made the entire platform shudder. Amanda heard several people gasp, and the sheriff's gun cleared its holster with a soft whisper of leather. But Ephraim Boone simply stood there, waiting. His chains glinting in the sunday. Amanda's mind raced. She hadn't thought beyond this moment, hadn't planned what to do with a chained giant once she'd freed him from the cage. She glanced around wildly, then squared her shoulders. "My mother's house, my house now, is just past the church. It's not far." Another slight nod. He moved with surprising grace for such a large man, following her down the steps. The crowd parted before them like water around a rock, leaving a wide path down the dusty street. Amanda could hear mothers hurrying their children inside, shop owners slamming doors and shutters. "Girl's gone plumb crazy," someone muttered. Worse than crazy, she signed her own death warrant. Amanda kept her eyes fixed straight ahead, pretending she couldn't hear them. The Bible in her pocket seemed to grow heavier with each step. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory. "The Lord works in mysterious ways, child. Sometimes the path he sets before us looks like madness to others." The mountain man's footsteps behind her were nearly silent, despite his size. She resisted the urge to look back, to make sure he was still following. The chain's soft clinking told her he was there. They passed the general store where Amanda had endured countless taunts about her size. Past the saloon where Mr. Dawson stood in the doorway, his face purple with thwarted rage. Past the church where Reverend Stevens watched with wide eyes, making the sign of the cross. Amanda's legs were trembling by the time they reached her mother's small house at the edge of town. The whitewash was peeling, the garden overgrown since her mother's passing 3 months ago, but the roof was sound, and the door still hung straight on its hinges. She fumbled with the latch, acutely aware of Ephraim Boone's massive presence behind her. The door creaked open to reveal the familiar, simple interior, the wooden table her father had made before the fever took him, her mother's rocking chair, the shelf of carefully preserved food that would have to last until spring. Amanda turned to face her. Purchase? Prisoner? Protector? She wasn't sure what to call him. He filled the doorway completely, blocking out most of the light. His face was unreadable. "I know it's not much," she said softly, "but you're welcome to stay. There's food, and I can make up a pallet in the corner, and—" She trailed off, suddenly overwhelmed by the enormity of what she'd done. Ephraim Boone ducked his head to step inside. His chains clinked against the doorframe. When he spoke, his voice was still that quiet rumble, like distant thunder. "Why?" Amanda blinked. "Sir? Why did you buy me?" His eyes held hers, searching. "Could have saved yourself instead." Amanda's hand strayed to the Bible in her pocket, drawing comfort from its familiar shape. "Because," she said slowly, "what they were doing to you was wrong, and what they were going to do to me was wrong too. And maybe 2 wrongs don't make a right, but 2 people who've been wronged might be able to help each other." She saw something shift in his expression then, a softening around his eyes. He looked around the small house, taking in every detail. His gaze lingered on her mother's rocking chair, the neat stack of darning by the window, the dried flowers hanging from the rafters. "Your mother taught you well," he said finally. Amanda felt tears welling up again, but this time they weren't from fear or shame. "Yes, sir," she did. "Ephraim," he said. "Just Ephraim." He held up his chained wrists. "Got anything that might help with these?" Amanda looked at the heavy manacles and felt the first real smile in months, tugging at her lips. "As a matter of fact, my father left some tools in the shed. He was good with metal." She straightened her apron, suddenly feeling more sure of herself. "Would you like some coffee first? It's been a long day for both of us." Ephraim's mouth twitched in what might have been the ghost of a smile. "Coffee would be fine, miss." "Amanda," she said. Just Amanda. Outside, the sun was sinking toward the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. A cool breeze stirred the overgrown garden, carrying the scent of sage and coming rain. In town, tongues would be wagging, plans being made, fear and anger brewing like storm clouds on the horizon. But for now, in the quiet of her mother's house, Amanda May set about making coffee for her unlikely guest, while Ephraim Boone settled his large frame carefully into a chair that creaked but held his weight. The chains clinked softly as he folded his hands on the table, waiting with a patience that spoke of long years in the wilderness. Neither of them knew what tomorrow would bring, but for this moment, they had found an unexpected harbor in each other's company. And sometimes, Amanda thought, remembering her mother's words, that was enough to begin with. The key jingled in Amanda's trembling hand as she approached the cage. Dozens of eyes bored into her back, and whispers rustled through the crowd like dry leaves. The metal was warm from the sun as she fitted the key into the lock, her fingers surprisingly steady despite her racing heart. The lock clicked open with a sound that seemed to echo down the dusty street. Amanda stepped back, her skirts brushing against the wooden platform as she pulled the cage door wide. The hinges creaked in protest, breaking the heavy silence that had fallen over the crowd. Ephraim Boone moved like water, smooth and deliberate, unfolding his massive frame from the confines of the cage. His chains clinked softly as he ducked through the door, straightening to his full height. Amanda had to tilt her head back to look up at him. This close, she could see the network of scars that crossed his face and disappeared beneath his collar, telling tales of wilderness battles she could only imagine. The sheriff hawked and spat in the dust beside the platform. "You'll regret wasting good silver on this one, girl." His hand stayed close to his gun, eyes narrow with disgust. "Ought to have saved yourself instead." Amanda lifted her chin, speaking loud enough for the gathered crowd to hear. "I bought him for freedom, not slavery." Her voice carried clearly despite its slight tremor. That's what that silver was meant for. Ephraim's head turned sharply at her words, those winter-gray eyes studying her with newfound intensity. Confusion flickered across his weathered features, followed by something deeper, more considering. Amanda met his gaze directly. "I only ask one promise in return," she said, her voice dropping so only he could hear. "Help me survive." The saloon keeper. She glanced toward where Dawson stood glowering from his doorway. "He won't give up easy. I need protection, just until I can figure something out." The mountain man's eyes followed her glance, taking in Dawson's predatory stance and the way the man's fingers drummed against the doorframe. His gaze returned to Amanda, seeing past her plain face and plump figure to the steel in her spine. After what felt like an eternity, he gave a single, slow nod. "Best we get moving then," he rumbled, his voice like distant thunder. They descended the platform steps together, Amanda's boots and Ephraim's chains making a strange duet on the wooden planks. The crowd parted before them, leaving a wide berth around the massive man and the girl who'd freed him. A group of children, emboldened by safety in numbers, began a sing-song chant from the edge of the crowd. "Fat Amanda, crazy Amanda, gonna get herself killed." Their high voices carried clearly in the still air. Amanda's cheeks burned, but she kept her eyes forward, clutching her mother's Bible tightly in her pocket. She heard the whispers following them down the street. Girls lost her mind completely. Always knew she wasn't right, after her mama passed. Shame about the silver, could have bought herself a fresh start somewhere. Ephraim shifted slightly, positioning his bulk between Amanda and the worst of the crowd. His shadow fell across her like a shield, and the whispers died away, replaced by nervous coughs and shuffling feet. No one quite dared to mock when those cold eyes turned their way. They walked the length of the main street, past the general store where Amanda had endured countless taunts, past the church where Reverend Stevens watched with sad eyes from the steps. When they reached the edge of town, Amanda turned not toward her mother's house, but onto the old wagon track that led into the hills. "Can't stay in town," she explained softly. "They'd find a way to take me, one way or another, and you'd end up back in chains." Ephraim grunted in agreement, matching his long stride to her shorter one as they followed the rutted track. The afternoon sun cast their shadows long ahead of them, and a cool breeze carried the scent of sage and coming evening. They walked until the sun hung low on the horizon, and their shadows stretched like giants across the landscape. Amanda's feet ached in her worn boots, but she pressed on until they came to a dry creek bed, sheltered by overhanging cottonwoods. "Here," she said, sinking gratefully onto a smooth boulder. "We can rest here for the night." Ephraim surveyed the spot with experienced eyes, noting the natural shelter and clear views in both directions. He nodded approval, then set about gathering wood with efficient movements despite his chains. Amanda dug in her small bundle, pulling out a loaf of bread wrapped in clean cloth, the last thing she'd baked in her mother's oven. She broke it in half, holding out the larger portion to Ephraim. He paused in his fire-making to accept it with those huge, scarred hands, handling the bread as carefully as if it were made of glass. The fire caught quickly under Ephraim's skilled touch, sending sparks dancing upward into the deepening dusk. Smoke curled into the cold night sky, carrying with it the last familiar sense of Amanda's old life-fresh bread, her mother's soap, the lingering trace of home. They sat in silence as darkness gathered around their small circle of firelight. Amanda watched the flames dance, wondering what her mother would think of the choice she'd made today. The Bible in her pocket seemed to warm slightly, as if in answer. Ephraim sat with his back against a boulder, his chains gathered carefully to prevent them from clinking. His eyes never stopped scanning their surroundings, even as he slowly ate his portion of bread. The firelight caught the silver in his hair and deepened the shadows of his scars. They were an unlikely pair, the massive, scarred mountain man and the plump, plain girl who'd freed him. But as the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Amanda felt the first flutter of hope in her chest. Whatever came next, she was no longer alone. The night grew colder, and Amanda pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Ephraim added another piece of wood to the fire, his movements deliberate and quiet. Neither spoke, but the silence between them had shifted from wary to watchful, two outcasts, finding unexpected shelter in each other's company. High above, a nighthawk called, its voice carrying clearly in the still air. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote answered. Amanda leaned back against her own boulder, feeling the day's tension slowly begin to ease. Her mother had always said the Lord worked in mysterious ways. Perhaps this strange partnership was part of his plan after all. The fire crackled softly, sending up a fresh spiral of smoke into the star-filled sky. Amanda wrapped her shawl more tightly and settled in for the night, while Ephraim kept his silent vigil. Together, they waited for whatever dawn would bring. The first pale light of dawn crept over the eastern hills, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and gold. Amanda stirred, her body stiff from sleeping on the hard ground. Every muscle protested as she pushed herself to sitting, brushing dirt and leaves from her skirts. A thin layer of frost coated the grass around their makeshift camp, glinting like scattered diamonds in the early light. Ephraim was already up and moving, his chains making soft music as he gathered fallen branches from beneath the cottonwoods. Amanda watched as his huge hands sorted the wood by size with surprising delicacy, arranging smaller twigs beneath larger branches. "Fire needs to breathe," he said gruffly, noticing her attention. It was the first thing he'd said since the previous evening. "Stack it loose, like this." He demonstrated, creating a careful structure that allowed air to flow through the gaps. Amanda nodded, committing the lesson to memory. "I reckon that makes sense," she said, pulling herself to her feet. Her worn boots felt too tight, her feet swollen from yesterday's long walk. After a small breakfast of the remaining bread, they set out along the creek bed. The morning air was crisp and clean, carrying the sharp scent of sage and juniper. Ephraim moved with surprising grace for such a large man, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. He paused often to point out things Amanda might have missed. The delicate prints of a deer that had passed in the night, the distinctive scratches where a bear had marked a tree, the subtle differences between edible and poisonous berries growing along their path. "These here's good eating," he said, indicating a cluster of dark purple berries. "But those," he pointed to similar-looking red ones nearby, "will make you sick as a dog. Got to know the difference if you want to survive up here." Amanda tried to absorb everything he showed her, though her breath came in heavy gasps as they climbed. Her legs trembled with the effort of keeping up, and sweat dampened her collar despite the cool morning air. Still, she refused to ask for rest, determined to prove she wasn't as weak as everyone thought. Ephraim glanced back occasionally, slowing his pace without comment when he saw her struggling. He cocked his head suddenly, holding up one hand for silence. "Listen," he commanded softly. Amanda stood still, trying to quiet her labored breathing. At first, she heard nothing but the whisper of wind through the trees and the rapid beating of her own heart. Then, gradually, she became aware of a faint sound, a musical trickling that seemed to come from somewhere ahead. "Water?" she asked hopefully. Ephraim nodded, leading the way around a bend in the creek bed. Here, a thin stream of water emerged from between the rocks, barely enough to wet the parched ground. The mountain man's face darkened as he studied it. Used to be chest. Deep here, he growled, his chains rattling as his hands clenched into fists. Before Greeley built his dam upstream. Greeley? Amanda asked, kneeling to touch the tepid water. Silas Greeley, land baron. Ephraim spat the words like they tasted bitter. Claims everything from here to the territory line. Dammed up every creek and stream he could find. Sells the water rights to whoever can pay his prices. His voice grew harder. Don't matter to him that folks downstream are dying of thirst. Don't matter that the Apache have used these waters since before any of us were born. Amanda's eyes widened as understanding dawned. So that's why so many homesteads are empty, why the native families moved away. Ephraim nodded grimly. Can't farm without water, can't raise stock, can't live. He gestured at the pitiful trickle. This here's all that's left of what used to feed the whole valley. They continued walking as the sun climbed higher, following the remnants of the creek. Amanda's heart grew heavier with each abandoned homestead they passed, each withered field. By late afternoon, dark clouds were gathering over the mountains, and Ephraim's eyes scanned the horizon with increasing frequency. Storm coming, he announced. Need shelter before it hits. As if in answer, they crested a small rise and saw an old line shack tucked against the hillside. It was weather-beaten but still standing, its door hanging slightly askew on leather hinges. Ephraim checked the interior first, chains jingling as he ducked through the low doorway. Empty, he called back. Roof's got holes, but it'll do. Amanda followed him inside, nose wrinkling at the musty smell. Dust lay thick on every surface, and dead leaves had blown in through the gaps in the walls. But it was shelter, and that was what mattered. She found a broken-handled broom in one corner and set to work sweeping, while Ephraim climbed onto the roof with a few pieces of scavenged wood to patch the worst holes. The physical labor helped warm her against the growing chill as the storm approached. By the time darkness fell, the shack was considerably cleaner. Amanda had arranged their meager supplies on the room's single shelf and laid out their bedrolls on opposite sides of the small space. She'd even managed to start a fire in the crude stone fireplace, using Ephraim's careful stacking method. Rain began to fall as Ephraim climbed down from the roof, the drops hissing against the newly patched shingles. Thunder rolled in the distance as they settled inside, a small lamp casting flickering shadows on the rough walls. Amanda sat cross-legged on her bedroll, watching the flames dance in the fireplace. The familiar weight of her mother's Bible pressed against her hip, and suddenly she felt an overwhelming urge to fill the silence with something besides thunder and rain. My mama used to sing, on nights like this, she said softly. Said music was God's way of reminding us he's near, even in the dark. Ephraim's expression didn't change, but something in his posture stiffened slightly. He said nothing, just stared into the flames with those winter-gray eyes. Amanda's heart pounded, but she gathered her courage and began to sing. Her voice wavered at first, uncertain in the small space. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. The familiar words gained strength as she continued, filling the shack with their simple melody. Outside, the storm grew closer, but Amanda kept singing, letting the hymn rise above the thunder. I once was lost, but now am found. Was blind, but now I see. She watched Ephraim from the corner of her eye as she sang. The mountain man sat motionless, his scarred hands clasped loosely between his knees. But as the last verse faded away, she saw something shift in his face like ice beginning to crack on a frozen stream. For a long moment after she finished, the only sounds were the crackling fire and the steady drumming of rain on the roof. Then Ephraim cleared his throat roughly. Been a long time since I heard that song, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. My ma used to sing it too when I was small. It wasn't much, that tiny piece of his past offered up in the lamplight, but Amanda recognized it for the gift. It was the first crack in the wall between them, the first hint that somewhere beneath those scars and chains, there might still be a heart capable of hope. The lamp flickered as wind gusted through the cracks in the walls. Amanda pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders, but she felt warmer somehow, despite the storm raging outside. She watched the lamplight play across Ephraim's weathered face and saw something there that hadn't been present before. a softening around his eyes, a slight easing of the hard lines around his mouth. Thunder crashed overhead, but in the small circle of lamplight, two outcasts had found a moment of peace, brought together by an old hymn and the simple grace of shared memories. Morning arrived with a silver sheen of frost coating the grass outside the line shack. Amanda's breath formed tiny clouds in the cold air as she stepped outside, pulling her shawl tight around her shoulders. The sun had barely cleared the eastern ridge, painting the mountains in shades of rose and gold. Ephraim was already awake, as usual, checking the perimeter of their shelter. His chains clinked softly as he moved, a sound Amanda had grown oddly accustomed to over the past day. He beckoned her over to where he crouched near a game trail. "See these tracks?" He pointed to tiny impressions in the frost-covered earth. "Rabbits. Regular as sunrise, they follow the same paths." Amanda knelt beside him, squinting at the delicate marks. "They're so small," she marveled. "Small, but they'll keep us fed." Ephraim pulled a length of wire from his pocket. "Watch close now. I'll show you how to set a snare." His huge hands, which could so easily snap the wire, instead manipulated it with surprising gentleness. Amanda watched intently as he demonstrated how to shape the loop, anchor it properly, and position it along the trail. "Too loose, rabbit slips free," he explained, adjusting the wire. "Too tight, they'll spot it and go around. Gotta be just right." They set several more snares together, Amanda's fingers growing steadier with each attempt. Ephraim nodded approval at her final effort, though he adjusted the anchor point slightly. Back at the shack, Ephraim turned his attention to their dwindling woodpile. He hefted an axe they'd found in the corner, testing its weight. Despite his chains, he swung it with frightening power, splitting logs with single blows that echoed through the crisp morning air. Amanda watched in awe for a few moments, then gathered her courage and picked up a smaller hatchet. "I can help," she offered. Ephraim paused mid-swing, studying her. "Kindling needs splitting," he said finally. "Start with the smaller pieces." Her first attempts were awkward, the hatchet glancing off the wood more often than not. Sweat dampened her hair despite the cold, and her arms trembled with effort. But she persisted, determined to contribute her share. "Like this," Ephraim demonstrated, adjusting her grip on the handle. "Let the weight of the blade do the work. Don't force it." Gradually, she found the rhythm of it. By midday, she had a respectable pile of kindling to show for her efforts, along with several blisters and an aching back. But there was satisfaction in the work, in knowing she'd earned her place. When they checked the snares that evening, 2 rabbits had been caught. Ephraim showed her how to clean them properly, his matter-of-fact instruction helping her past her initial squeamishness. Soon the shack filled with the savory smell of rabbit stew bubbling in their only pot. Amanda stirred the pot anxiously, adding wild onions and herbs Ephraim had gathered. "I hope it's edible," she fretted. "I've never cooked rabbit before." When the stew was ready, she ladled it into their tin cups with trembling hands. Ephraim took his first bite in silence, his expression unreadable. Amanda held her breath. "Tastes like," he began, then stopped, something distant in his eyes, like something my mother used to make. He cleared his throat roughly and fell silent, turning his attention back to the stew. Amanda beamed at the half-spoken compliment, her own portion tasting all the better for it. Days fell into a pattern after that. Each morning brought new lessons in survival, tracking, foraging, reading weather signs in the sky. Ephraim proved a patient teacher, though he never wasted words. His quiet approval became something Amanda found herself working for, taking pride in each new skill mastered. One afternoon, he unwrapped a bundle from his few possessions, revealing a worn Colt single-action revolver. "Time you learned to shoot," he announced. Amanda stared at the weapon with mingled fascination and fear. "I've never. Need to know how," Ephraim insisted. "World's not safe for those who can't defend themselves." He showed her how to load it, how to hold it properly, how to sight along the barrel. They set up targets, tin cans on a fallen log, and he stood behind her, adjusting her stance. "Breathe steady," he instructed. "Squeeze the trigger slow and smooth. Don't jerk it." Her first shots went wild, the recoil stronger than she'd expected, but Ephraim was patient, correcting her grip, demonstrating again and again until she could hit the cans more often than not. Each evening, as darkness gathered, Amanda would take out her mother's Bible. At first, Ephraim would turn away, busying himself with tasks at the far side of the shack. But gradually, He began to listen as she read aloud, her voice growing stronger and more confident with each passage. Sometimes she caught him mouthing familiar verses silently, though he never joined in openly. Those moments made her heart ache with a peculiar mixture of sadness and hope. The rhythm of their days built something neither of them spoke about, a partnership of necessity slowly transforming into something deeper. They moved around each other with growing ease, each anticipating the other's needs, sharing tasks without discussion. But danger lurked at the edges of their fragile peace. Ephraim grew increasingly watchful, his eyes scanning the tree line whenever they stepped outside. He began taking longer circuits around the shack, checking for signs of intruders. "We're being watched," he warned one evening, returning from his patrol. Amanda looked up from stirring their supper. "How can you be sure? Tracks in the creek bed. Cigarette butt by the spring. Someone's keeping eyes on us." "Maybe it's just travelers passing through," Amanda suggested, not wanting to believe their sanctuary could be threatened. Ephraim shook his head. "No. These are men who know their business. Greeley's men, I'd wager." Amanda wanted to dismiss his concerns. But that night, as she washed their few dishes by lamplight, a shadow passed across the window. Her gasp brought Ephraim to his feet in an instant, chains rattling as he grabbed his revolver. He was out the door before Amanda could speak, moving with surprising silence despite his size. She stood frozen by the wash basin, heart pounding in her ears, straining to hear anything above the night sounds. Minutes stretched like hours before Ephraim returned, his face grim in the lamplight. "They're gone now," he growled. "But they'll be back." Amanda's hands trembled as she set down the dish she'd been clutching. "What do we do?" Some would say run. Ephraim checked the revolver's chambers before setting it within easy reach. "But I've done enough running in my life. Greeley's men want to frighten us off? Let them try. We'll stand our ground?" Amanda's voice quavered slightly. Ephraim's scarred face softened slightly as he looked at her. "We ain't rabbits to be scared from our burrow," he said firmly. "This shelter's ours fair and square. Time to show them we mean to keep it." Amanda straightened her shoulders, drawing strength from his resolve. Outside, an owl called in the darkness, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote answered. But inside the line shack, two unlikely allies faced their fears together, neither willing to surrender the home they'd begun to build. The lamp flickered as a breeze found its way through the cracks in the walls. Amanda resumed her dishwashing, while Ephraim took up his usual evening position near the door, alert for any further disturbance. The familiar routine felt different now, charged with new purpose. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were defending something that belonged to them. The borrowed mule's hooves kicked up small clouds of dust as Amanda and Ephraim made their way toward Miller's trading post. The morning sun cast long shadows across the trail, and Amanda clutched a bundle of carefully sewn gloves in her lap. She'd worked on them during the quiet evenings, determined to earn her own way. "Reckon these'll fetch a fair price," she said, more to convince herself than Ephraim. Her companion merely nodded, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon as they rode. The trading post appeared around a bend, a weathered wooden building with a hitching rail out front. Several horses were already tied there, their riders visible through the grimy windows. Amanda's stomach tightened at the sight of other people, but she straightened her back, remembering her mother's words about holding her head high. Ephraim dismounted first, his chains clinking softly as he helped Amanda down. She noticed how he positioned himself between her and the building's entrance, like a shield, against the stares they were sure to receive. The bell above the door jangled as they entered. Conversation stopped. Amanda felt the familiar weight of eyes upon her, judging, wondering, condemning. She clutched her bundle of gloves tighter. "Well, if it ain't the fat girl and her pet giant," someone muttered, just loud enough to be heard. Amanda's cheeks burned, but she kept walking, making her way to the counter where old Mr. Miller stood polishing his spectacles. "Good morning, Mr. Miller," she said clearly, proud that her voice didn't shake. "I've brought some items to trade." The shopkeeper's eyebrows rose as Amanda unwrapped her handiwork. The gloves were simple but sturdy, each stitch even and strong. She'd used techniques her mother had taught her, reinforcing the wear points and adding subtle decorative touches around the cuffs. "These are fine work, Miss Amanda," Miller said, examining them carefully. "I could offer you fair trade in flour and coffee, if that suits." Behind them, whispers continued to circulate, living together in that old line shack. Him being a killer and all. Ain't natural. Amanda kept her chin up, though her hands trembled slightly as she negotiated with Miller. Ephraim remained near the door, his massive presence drawing nervous glances from the other customers. But Amanda noticed how he positioned himself to hear everything, especially the conversation happening near the water barrel. Greeley's raising the rates again, one man was saying. Doubled the fee for access to the creek. What about them Apache families up by the North Fork? Cut off completely unless they pay. Children going thirsty while that devil builds his empire. Amanda saw Ephraim's jaw tighten, though he gave no other sign of hearing. She finished her trading quickly, tucking the precious packages of flour and coffee into her bag. The bell jangled again as they left, and Amanda could breathe easier in the open air. The ride back was quiet for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Amanda gathered her courage. "Ephraim," she said softly, "what really happened? With those soldiers, I mean?" He didn't answer for so long she thought he wouldn't. Then his deep voice rumbled, barely above a whisper. "Was a homestead, about 3 years back. Family with young ones. Soldiers came, drunk and mean. Said the land was army property now." Amanda waited, sensing there was more. They were going to burn them out. Already set fire to the barn. He paused, his massive hands tightening on the reins. "I did what needed doing. Killed 3 men that day. Ain't proud of it, but I'd do it again to save them children." "I believe you," Amanda said simply. Ephraim turned to look at her then, his scarred face troubled. "Maybe you shouldn't. Got blood on these hands that won't never wash clean." "My mother always said the good book teaches about justice and mercy both," Amanda replied. "Seems to me you chose justice when it was needed most." Something flickered in Ephraim's eyes. Pain, or maybe hope, before he turned back to the trail. They rode the rest of the way in companionable silence. That evening, Amanda worked at their small table, measuring flour for biscuits while their supper stew bubbled on the fire. The trading post's whispers still echoed in her mind, but somehow they seemed less important now. This simple cabin, with its patched roof and sturdy walls, had become more of a home than she'd ever expected. As she worked, she began to hum one of her mother's favorite hymns. The melody filled the small space, and without thinking, she shifted into words. "Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me." She nearly stopped when another voice joined in, deep, rough with disuse, but true. Ephraim's bass rumbled beneath her soprano, uncertain at first, then growing stronger. "I once was lost, but now am found, was blind, but now I see." They finished the verse together, the last notes fading into the evening quiet. Amanda's eyes were damp as she looked across at her unlikely companion. "Never thought I'd have someone to sing with again," she whispered. Ephraim ducked his head, embarrassed by the moment of openness. But Amanda saw how his shoulders had relaxed, how the haunted look in his eyes had softened just a bit. The biscuits came out golden brown, filling the shack with their homey smell. As they ate their simple meal, Amanda realized something had shifted between them. The whispers at the trading post had called them unnatural, the fat girl and the giant killer. But here, in this moment, they were simply family. Different and broken, perhaps, but healing together. Outside, a whippoorwill called in the gathering dusk. Inside, the lamp cast warm light on 2 people who had found, against all odds, a place to belong. Amanda reached for another biscuit, watching Ephraim scrape his bowl clean with evident satisfaction. Neither of them needed to say what they both felt, that this shelter had become more than just a hiding place. It had become home. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as Amanda knelt by the creek's edge. Sweat trickled down her neck, and her throat felt parched from the morning's work of hanging laundry. The water looked inviting, though something about its color seemed off. A strange, milky cast that didn't look quite natural. Mighty thirsty work, she muttered to herself, cupping her hands. Ephraim was up checking their snare lines, and she'd been looking forward to a cool drink. The water tasted bitter, but she was too parched to care. An hour later, the first cramps hit. Amanda was stirring a pot of beans when a wave of dizziness swept over her. The wooden spoon clattered to the floor as she grabbed the table's edge, her vision swimming. Her stomach churned violently. "Ephraim?" she called weakly, but he hadn't returned yet. The cabin walls seemed to tilt and spin around her. She managed 2, stumbling steps before her knees buckled. The door burst open just as she fell. Ephraim's massive form filled the doorway, his arms full of rabbits from the snares. He took one look at her crumpled form and dropped everything. "Amanda!" His voice seemed to come from very far away. Large hands gently lifted her, and she felt herself being carried. "What happened, girl?" "The creek," she managed to whisper. "Drank from it. Tastes wrong." Ephraim's curse echoed through the cabin as he laid her carefully on the straw pallet. His rough fingers felt her forehead, drawing back at the heat already building there. "Fever's coming on fast. Creek must be poisoned. Probably Greeley's work, trying to drive folks away." Amanda shivered despite the warmth of the day. Her stomach twisted again, and Ephraim barely got her to the door in time. When the retching passed, she felt as weak as a newborn kitten. The giant's face was tight with worry as he carried her back to the pallet. "Need to get the poison out," he muttered, more to himself than to her. He brought water from their barrel, clean water they'd collected before, and helped her sip slowly. "Keep drinking, even if it comes back up. Got to flush it through." Hours passed in a blur of misery. The fever rose steadily, and Amanda's world narrowed to the rough scratch of straw beneath her and Ephraim's constant presence. He kept cool cloths on her forehead, changing them whenever they grew warm. His huge hands, capable of such violence, were surprisingly gentle as he tended her. As night fell, Amanda's fever dreams began. She thrashed on the pallet, muttering about her mother, about the cruel children's taunts, about the fear of being alone. Ephraim sat beside her, his broad shoulders hunched with helplessness. Finally, when her breathing grew particularly labored, he did something he hadn't done in years. He prayed. "Lord," he whispered roughly, "ain't been much for talking to you since. Well, you know since when, but this girl." He paused, struggling with the words. "She's good, Lord. Pure heart. Believes in you still, even after everything. Don't take her. Please." His unpracticed prayer hung in the darkness. Amanda stirred, her eyes fluttering open but unfocused. "Mama?" she called softly. "Mama? Did you hide it good? The papers. The deed." Ephraim leaned closer. "What papers, Amanda?" "In the hymnal," she murmured. "Mama's old book," she said. "Said it would save us all someday. Water rights. Territorial office." Her voice trailed off as another wave of fever took her. Ephraim's eyes widened. He looked at Amanda's small trunk in the corner, where she kept her mother's few possessions. But no, searching would have to wait. Amanda's fever was still dangerously high. Through the long night, he kept his vigil. He changed the cool cloths, helped her sip water, and listened to her fevered mumblings. Sometimes she sang fragments of hymns, her voice thin and wavering. Other times she cried out in fear or pain. Each time, Ephraim's large hand would find hers, anchoring her to safety. As dawn's first light crept through the cabin's single window, Amanda's fever finally broke. Her breathing eased, and her skin felt cooler to the touch. She fell into a natural sleep, her face peaceful for the first time in hours. Ephraim watched her for a long moment, making sure she was truly resting. Then he moved quietly to her trunk. Inside, wrapped carefully in a faded shawl, lay her mother's hymnal. The book was well worn, its pages soft with use. As he opened it, something slipped from between the cover and the first page. His hands trembled slightly as he unfolded the papers. There it was, an official deed from the Territorial Office, properly signed and sealed. It granted water rights to the creek and surrounding tributaries. Dated 2 years ago, Amanda's mother's name was clearly written as the owner. Ephraim sank onto a chair, staring at the document in disbelief. This changed everything. With legal rights to the water, they could challenge Greeley's dam. They could force him to release the water he'd stolen from settlers and Apache alike. He looked at Amanda, sleeping on her pallet. This girl, this plump, brave, kind-hearted girl whom everyone had dismissed, held in her possession the very thing that could bring justice to the valley. No wonder her mother had hidden it so carefully. No wonder Greeley's men had been watching them. The morning sun streamed through the window, catching dust motes in its beam. Amanda stirred slightly, her color much better than it had been. She would recover, Ephraim knew, and when she did, they would have important decisions to make. But for now, he carefully refolded the deed and returned it to its hiding place in the hymnal. He moved back to Amanda's side, settling in to watch over her as she slept. His prayer from the night before still hung in his mind, and for the first time in years, he felt something like hope stirring in his chest. Perhaps the Lord wasn't finished with him yet. Perhaps, through this unlikely partnership with a young girl who had shown him kindness, there was still a chance for redemption, for both of them. Amanda slept on, unaware of the power she held in that old hymnal, unaware that her fevered revelations had changed the course of their future. Ephraim reached for the cool cloth, gently wiping her forehead. Whatever came next, he knew one thing for certain. He would protect her with his life. She had saved him from the cage, and now her mother's foresight might save them all. The creek burbled outside, its poisoned waters a reminder of the fight ahead. But inside the cabin, in the quiet morning light, there was only the peaceful sound of Amanda's breathing and the silent gratitude in Ephraim's heart that she had survived the night. The morning after her fever broke, Amanda tried to stand from her pallet. Her legs trembled like a newborn colt's, and she would have fallen if Ephraim hadn't caught her with his quick reflexes. "Easy there," he rumbled, helping her back down. "Poison still working its way out." "I'm fine," Amanda insisted, though her face was as pale as fresh flour. She managed a weak smile. "Just a mite wobbly is all." Ephraim snorted at her stubbornness but helped her settle near the fireplace. The flames cast a warm glow on her drawn features as he spooned rich rabbit broth into a tin cup. "Small sips," he instructed, pressing the cup into her hands. "Your stomach ain't ready for more yet." Amanda's hands shook slightly, but she lifted the cup herself. "I told you, I can manage." Her chin lifted with determination, though her voice was still weak. Ephraim watched her carefully, ready to catch the cup if needed. After a few successful sips, he reached for the hymnal he'd placed nearby. "Think you're strong enough to talk about what we found?" Amanda's eyes widened as he carefully extracted the deed. "Mama's papers? You found them? You told me where to look, during your fever." He spread the document on the rough wooden floor between them. "Your mama was smarter than folks gave her credit for." Amanda touched the paper reverently, tracing her mother's signature. "She never told me exactly what it was, just said it was important, that it would help people someday." Her voice caught, said to keep it safe in her hymnal, next to the songs she loved. Together, they studied the official document. The territorial office's seal was clear and unbroken, the legal language precise. Amanda's mother had purchased the water rights 2 years before her death, when the creek still ran free and clear. "Greeley's dam is illegal," Ephraim said slowly. "He's stealing water that rightfully belongs to your family. Not just my family." Amanda's voice grew stronger. "The Apache families, too. Everyone who depends on that creek." She looked up at Ephraim, her jaw set firmly despite her pallor. "We have to take this to the reservation agency. They're the only ones with authority to enforce it." Ephraim's scarred face darkened. "I'll take it. Too dangerous for you to travel yet." "No." Amanda's voice was quiet but firm. "Mama bought these rights. Her daughter should be the one to present them." She managed a wan smile. "Besides, they're more likely to listen to a girl than a—" She trailed off, not wanting to repeat the cruel names the townsfolk used for him. "A giant killer?" Ephraim finished dryly. "Maybe so, but you're barely on your feet." "Then we'll wait until I'm stronger." Amanda sipped more broth, color slowly returning to her cheeks. "Well, when had detta, seven detta, when detta, when had detta, when detta, when had detta, when detta, when detta, when had detta, when 2 and 10, when 2 and 2 detta. A few days won't matter, long as we're careful with the deed." Over the next 3 days, Amanda's strength gradually returned. Ephraim watched her push herself to recover, walking a little further each day, insisting on helping with small chores. Her determination reminded him of a young sapling bending in the wind, flexible but unbreakable. When she could finally walk steadily, Ephraim began teaching her to ride properly. They had only one elderly mule, borrowed from a sympathetic trader, but it would have to do. "Sit straight," he instructed, steadying her as she mounted. "Let your weight settle deep in the saddle." Amanda gathered the reins as he'd shown her, though her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Poor creature. Probably wishes he had a lighter burden. "Mule's stronger than he looks," Ephraim said firmly. "Like some folks I know." They packed carefully for the journey: dried meat, hard biscuits, coffee, and blankets. Amanda wrapped the precious deed in oilcloth and tucked it securely in her shawl. Ephraim added extra ammunition for his rifle and her revolver, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon for danger. They set out at dawn, when the air was cool and crisp. Amanda rode while Ephraim walked beside, one hand never far from his rifle. The deed's presence made them both wary. If Greeley's men knew they had it, they'd stop at nothing to destroy it. The first day's travel was slow but steady. Amanda grew more confident in the saddle, though she still apologized to the mule whenever they crossed rough ground. By evening, her face was drawn with fatigue, but she didn't complain. They made camp in a sheltered hollow, where Ephraim could watch the approaches easily. As darkness fell, Amanda insisted on singing a quiet hymn, her voice carrying softly on the night air. The familiar melody seemed to ease something in both of them. "Get some sleep," Ephraim said when she finished. "I'll keep watch." Amanda wrapped herself in blankets, but paused before lying down. "Ephraim, thank you for everything." He just nodded, his massive form a reassuring shadow in the starlight. The second day dawned clear and cool. They ate a cold breakfast and continued their journey, making steady progress toward the reservation agency. Amanda's riding had improved enough that they could move a bit faster, though Ephraim still kept a watchful eye on her strength. As the sun rose higher, they caught their first glimpse of the agency building in the distance. The American flag snapped in the wind above the wooden structure, and they could see soldiers patrolling the grounds, their rifles glinting in the morning light. Amanda's hand crept to her shawl, feeling the shape of the deed hidden there. Her lips moved in silent prayer, asking for courage like her mother's. Ephraim noticed her nervousness and moved closer to the mule. "Ain't too late to turn back," he said quietly. "Let me handle it instead." Amanda shook her head, her chin lifting with familiar determination despite her pale face. "No. Mama bought these rights fair and square. Her daughter will see justice done." She managed a small smile. "Besides, you'll be right there with me." Ephraim nodded, his scarred face softening slightly. This plump, brave girl had shown him more trust than he'd known in years. He wouldn't fail her now. They approached the ratings as X7, agency slowly, aware of the soldiers' sharp eyes upon them. Amanda sat as straight as she could in the saddle, trying to project confidence she didn't quite feel. The deed seemed to burn against her skin, its importance weighing heavily on her shoulders. The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty yard as they drew closer to the building. Amanda whispered one final prayer, her mother's favorite psalm: "The Lord is my strength and my shield. My heart trusts in him, and he helps me." The reservation agency's wooden floor creaked beneath Amanda's feet as she stepped inside, Ephraim's massive presence close behind her. The main room smelled of dust and old paper, with shafts of morning sunlight cutting through grimy windows. Several clerks hunched over their desks, while a group of Apache mothers waited quietly on wooden benches along the wall. Amanda's heart hammered against her ribs as she approached the main desk. The clerk, a thin man with wire-rimmed spectacles, barely glanced up from his ledger. "State your business," he drawled. Her fingers trembled as she unwrapped the deed from its oilcloth covering. "Sir, I have papers to present, about water rights for Cedar Creek." The clerk's eyes flicked between Amanda's plain dress and Ephraim's looming figure. His lip curled slightly. "Water rights? And who might you be?" "Amanda May Wilson, sir. My mother purchased these rights 2 years ago." She placed the document carefully on his desk. "The dam that's been built is illegal according to territorial law." The clerk picked up the paper with 2 fingers as if it might soil his hands. "A girl claiming water rights?" he snorted. "And I suppose this, Mountain Man, is your legal counsel?" Ephraim's massive fist crashed down on the desk, rattling inkwells and sending papers flying. "Read the document." His voice was low and dangerous. The clerk's face paled, but before he could respond, a new voice cut through the tension. "I'll examine those papers, Mr. Harrison." A tall man in a worn black coat stepped forward from a side office, the Apache agent, Thomas Burke. His face was weathered, his eyes tired but alert. Amanda had heard he was known for fairness, though his job wore him down. Burke took the deed carefully, holding it to the light. The room fell silent except for the scratching of his pen as he made notes. More people filtered in, curious townsfolk who'd seen Amanda and Ephraim arrive, a few settlers, and Reverend Matthews, who'd been waiting to discuss supplies for the mission school. "These papers," Burke announced finally, "are completely legitimate, purchased and registered through proper channels." He looked at Amanda with newfound respect. "Your mother was Sarah Wilson?" Amanda nodded, her throat tight. "Yes, sir. I remember her. Quiet woman, but determined." He turned to address the growing crowd. "According to territorial law, this deed grants water rights to Cedar Creek, extending 3 miles upstream and 2 miles down from the Wilson homestead." His voice hardened. "The dam currently blocking that water is illegal." Murmurs rippled through the room. The Apache mothers leaned forward, hope lighting their faces as Burke's words were translated. Several settlers shifted uncomfortably, knowing they'd supported Greeley's claims. Amanda gathered her courage, speaking louder than she ever had in public. "The dam must be broken. The water belongs to everyone, settlers and Apache alike. My mother," her voice caught but steadied, "my mother believed that sharing the creek was God's will. No one should thirst while others waste water." Reverend Matthews stepped forward, his Bible in hand. "The girl speaks truth. Scripture tells us, 'Let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream.'" He smiled gently at Amanda. "Your mother understood this well." Silence filled the room. Amanda felt the weight of every eye upon her. The clerks, the soldiers, the settlers, the Apache mothers. Her legs trembled, but Ephraim's solid presence behind her gave her strength. Then one of the Apache women began to clap, slowly at first, then with growing enthusiasm. Others joined in, settlers, soldiers, even some of the clerks. Burke nodded approvingly as he signed an order for the dam's removal. "The territorial marshal will enforce this," he declared. "The water will flow again by week's end." Amanda's eyes filled with tears of relief and joy. She felt Ephraim's huge hand rest gently on her shoulder, a gesture of pride that meant more than any applause. As the crowd began to disperse, people stopped to shake Amanda's hand or touch her arm in blessing. The Apache mothers embraced her, murmuring thanks in their language. Even the sneering clerk managed a grudging nod of respect. Outside, the afternoon sun had softened to golden light. Word of Amanda's deed spread quickly through the town. Reverend Matthews approached them as they prepared to leave. "There's a special service tonight," he said, "to give thanks for the water's return. Would you both join us?" Amanda looked up at Ephraim questioningly. To her surprise, he nodded. That evening, the small church glowed with candlelight. Every pew was filled, settlers and Apache families sitting side by side, perhaps for the first time. Amanda sat near the front, Ephraim's large frame somehow fitting comfortably beside her. When the singing began, Amanda's voice rose clear and strong with the familiar hymns her mother had loved. She nearly stopped in surprise when she heard Ephraim's deep bass joining in, rough but true, harmonizing naturally with her higher notes. She glanced up at him and saw something she'd never seen before, a real smile transforming his scarred face, softening the hard lines around his eyes. He looked younger, peaceful, as if some heavy burden had finally lifted from his shoulders. The candlelight flickered across faces shining with joy and hope. Amanda felt her mother's presence strongly in that moment, as if she too were singing along. The music swelled, voices blending in harmony, filling the little church with a sound as pure and life-giving as the creek itself. Looking around at the unified congregation, Apache mothers bouncing babies, settlers tapping their feet, Ephraim's unexpected smile, and her own heart so full it might burst, Amanda knew her mother's dream had finally come true. The water would flow freely again, bringing life and peace to all who thirsted for both. The hymn ended, but its echoes seemed to linger in the warm air. Amanda reached for her mother's Bible, holding it close as the congregation bowed their heads in prayer. Ephraim's quiet voice joined the others in saying, "Amen." Dawn painted the eastern sky in delicate strokes of pink and gold. The air was crisp with early morning chill as Amanda stood near the cook fire outside the agency, humming softly while she worked biscuit dough between her fingers. The smell of coffee brewing and bacon sizzling drifted across the camp, drawing sleepy soldiers from their tents. "Smells mighty fine, Miss Amanda," one young private said, tipping his hat as he approached with his tin cup. His boots were already dusty despite the early hour. Amanda smiled, carefully laying out rows of biscuits on the heavy iron griddle. Much obliged, figured everyone could use a hearty breakfast after all the excitement yesterday. She glanced over at Ephraim, who sat quietly whittling a piece of wood nearby. His massive frame seemed more relaxed than she'd ever seen it, his usual scowl replaced by something close to contentment. The camp slowly came to life as the sun climbed higher. Apache families emerged from their lodges, children racing toward the creek where water now flowed freely. Their laughter carried on the morning breeze, bright and clear as birdsong. Several mothers stopped to thank Amanda again, pressing her hands in theirs before continuing on their morning routines. "Never thought I'd see such peace," Ephraim rumbled, coming to stand beside her as she distributed hot biscuits. His voice was gruff, but held a warmth that made Amanda's heart swell with pride. "Reckon Mother knew what she was doing when she bought those water rights," Amanda replied, dusting flour from her apron. "Come on, let's walk down to the creek before it gets too hot." They made their way along the newly flowing water, watching children splash and play. Apache and settler kids alike squealed with delight as they chased minnows in the shallows, their parents calling good-natured warnings about wet clothes. The creek burbled merrily over rocks that had been dry just days before, bringing life back to the parched earth. Ephraim's stride was easy, without the tension that usually kept his shoulders rigid. "You did good, girl," he said softly. "Real good." Amanda felt tears prick her eyes at the simple praise. "We did good," she corrected him. "I couldn't have done any of this without you, Ephraim." They had just turned to head back toward camp when Amanda noticed something odd. A dark smudge marred the crystal blue sky to the north. Her steps slowed as she squinted against the morning sunday. "Ephraim?" Her voice wavered. "Is that smoke?" Before he could answer, the thunder of hoofbeats shattered the peaceful morning. A rider appeared on the ridge, his horse lathered and heaving. "Fire!" he shouted. "Greeley's men have fired the line shack." Amanda's hand flew to her mouth as more riders emerged, bringing news that sent the camp into chaos. Greeley's men had struck in the night, torching not just the line shack but several homesteads that had supported Amanda's cause. The peaceful morning dissolved into frantic activity as soldiers scrambled to organize a response. "We need to get you somewhere safe," Ephraim growled, his body tensing as he scanned the surrounding hills. But before they could move, gunfire erupted from multiple directions. Greeley's men poured into the churchyard like a flood, at least 20 strong. They fired into the air, scattering the crowds of terrified families. Children screamed as mothers grabbed them, running for cover. Soldiers returned fire, but they were caught off guard and outnumbered. "Get behind me." Ephraim shoved Amanda toward the church steps, but 3 riders had already circled behind them. "There's the girl," one shouted. "Greeley wants her alive." Ephraim roared like a wounded bear, swinging his massive fists at the first man who tried to grab Amanda. The attacker went down hard, but more rushed in. Amanda screamed as rough hands seized her arms. She kicked and fought, but they were too strong. "Ephraim!" she cried, watching in horror as 4 men attacked him at once. He fought like a wild thing, throwing them off. But then came the sickening crack of rifle butts against his skull. Once, twice, 3 times before the giant finally crumpled to his knees. "No!" Amanda's voice broke as they dragged her toward a waiting wagon. "Ephraim, please, get up!" But Ephraim lay motionless in the dust, blood trickling from his temple. Men quickly bound his unconscious form with heavy chains, the same ones that had held him in the cage before. Amanda struggled harder as they lifted him, carrying him to where that dreaded cage now sat on a wagon bed. The sheriff appeared, his badge glinting in the morning sun as he supervised Ephraim being locked away. Amanda felt her heart stop as she heard his next words. "Ephraim Boone, you're under arrest for assault and resisting law officers. You'll hang at dawn tomorrow." The sheriff's voice carried the false ring of rehearsed justice. his eyes never quite meeting those of the watching crowds. The shine of Greeley's gold was almost visible in his pocket. "He's innocent," Amanda screamed as they forced her into the second wagon. "This is wrong. Please, somebody help us." But the soldiers who hadn't been wounded were still pinned down by gunfire. The Apache families had fled to safety with their children. Even Reverend Matthews lay groaning from a blow to the head when he'd tried to intervene. Ephraim's cage rattled as the wagon bearing it lurched into motion. Amanda caught one last glimpse of him through the bars as consciousness returned, his eyes finding hers with such deep despair it broke her heart. Then rough hands forced her down onto the wagon's wooden floor. "Ephraim!" she cried one final time as the wagon carrying her rolled away in the opposite direction. But only dust and the echo of gunfire answered as her voice faded into the morning air. The peaceful dawn had transformed into nightmare, where children's laughter had rung out just moments before. Now only the groans of the wounded and the crackle of distant fires filled the air. Ephraim's cage grew smaller and smaller as the wagons diverged, while Amanda's tears fell unnoticed in the shadow of Greeley's violence. The creek still flowed, its water now running red with blood where the innocent had fallen. The deed that had brought such hope now seemed to mock them all, its promise of justice drowned in the terrible consequences of greed. As Amanda's cries grew distant, Ephraim gripped the iron bars of his prison until his knuckles turned white, despair flooding his heart like poison. Dawn's gentle promise had become a bitter morning of betrayal, and the sun climbed higher in a sky now stained with smoke and suffering. Amanda's head throbbed as consciousness slowly returned. Rough wooden boards pressed against her cheek, and the musty smell of hay filled her nostrils. She tried to move but found her wrists bound tightly behind her back with coarse rope. Through gaps in the floorboards, lantern light flickered from below, casting strange shadows in the barn loft where she lay. The creak of boots on wooden steps made her heart race. Heavy footfalls approached, and Amanda squeezed her eyes shut, pretending to still be unconscious. A toe nudged her side, none too gently. "Wake up, girl." Silas Greeley's voice dripped with contempt. "I know you're faking." Amanda opened her eyes to find the land baron looming over her, his expensive suit incongruous in the dusty barn loft. His silver watch chain gleamed in the dim light as he crossed his arms, looking down at her with naked disdain. "Quite a mess you've stirred up," he said, beginning to pace. "That deed of yours has caused me considerable inconvenience, though I suppose I should thank you for finally giving me an excuse to rid the territory of that mountain savage." Amanda struggled to sit up, her bound wrists making it awkward. "His name is Ephraim," she said, lifting her chin despite her fear. "And he's twice the man you'll ever be." Greeley's laugh was cold and sharp as breaking glass. "Listen to you, the fat little orphan girl, playing at being brave." He stopped pacing to sneer down at her. "Look at yourself. No family, no future. Who's going to care what happens to you? Who's going to come save someone like you?" His words struck deep, finding the doubts Amanda had carried all her life. She was used to the taunts about her size, the sideways glances, the cruel whispers. But something had changed in her these past weeks. The memory of Ephraim's gruff kindness, his quiet acceptance, gave her strength. Instead of responding, Amanda closed her eyes and began to softly sing one of her mother's favorite hymns. The familiar words steadied her racing heart as Greeley's boots scraped across the floor. "Sing all you want," he spat. "Tomorrow at dawn your giant friend hangs, and then we'll see what to do with you." His footsteps retreated down the stairs, leaving Amanda alone in the shadowy loft. As soon as his footsteps faded, Amanda began testing her bonds. The rope bit into her wrists, but she refused to give up. Rolling onto her side, she noticed something, a board in the barn wall that didn't quite meet its neighbor. A gap showed where the nails had worked loose over time. Across town in the jailhouse, Ephraim sat in his old cage, dried blood caking one side of his face where the rifle butts had struck him. His massive frame barely fit the confined space, forcing him to hunch forward uncomfortably. But the physical discomfort was nothing compared to the ache in his heart, knowing he had failed to protect Amanda. For the first time since he could remember, Ephraim felt truly broken. The weight of his past pressed down on him, all the violence, all the death he had dealt with his hands. He had tried to atone by helping Amanda, by choosing a better path. Now she would suffer for trusting him. Slowly, painfully, Ephraim lowered himself to his knees in the cage. The chains rattled softly as he bowed his head. Words he hadn't spoken in years came haltingly to his lips. "Lord," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion, "I ain't worthy to ask anything of you. These hands have done terrible things." Tears began to cut clean tracks through the dirt on his weathered face. "But please, please protect that girl. She saw something worth saving in me when no one else did. Don't let her pay for my sins." Outside the jailhouse, townsfolk gathered in small groups, speaking in hushed voices. Some recalled how Amanda and Ephraim had united settler and Apache families over the water rights. Others remembered the giant's gentle manner with children at the trading post, but few dared speak openly against Greeley's influence. The guard posted outside the jail took frequent pulls from a whiskey bottle as night deepened. His head began to nod, chin dropping to his chest. Soon, soft snores filled the otherwise quiet jail. Back in the barn loft, Amanda worked methodically at her task. She had managed to scoot close to the loose board, using it to scrape at the ropes binding her wrists. The rough wood tore at her skin, but she barely noticed the pain. Hours passed as she patiently worked the rope against the board's edge. Finally, with a last, desperate twist, the frayed rope gave way. Amanda bit back a cry of triumph as she brought her arms forward, rubbing circulation back into her raw wrists. The moon had risen, casting pale light through gaps in the roof. She knew she had to move quickly. The loose board came away with surprising ease when she pushed at it. The opening was small, but Amanda was determined. Ignoring the splinters that dug into her palms, she squeezed through the gap. Her dress caught and tore, but she didn't care. The barn's outer wall had a ladder of sorts, missing boards that made convenient handholds. Moving as quietly as she could, Amanda climbed down. Her legs trembled from being bound so long, but she forced herself to move. Keeping to the shadows, she made her way toward the jail. Every sound made her freeze. A dog barking in the distance, the flutter of a bat overhead, the crunch of her own footsteps in the dirt. The jailhouse came into view, its single lantern casting a pool of yellow light. Amanda's heart leaped when she saw the guard slumped in his chair, chin on chest, bottle fallen from slack fingers. Still, she waited several minutes, watching to be sure he was truly deeply asleep. Holding her breath, Amanda crept closer. She could see Ephraim's huge form in the cage through the jailhouse window. Moving like a shadow, she eased around to the back of the building where the window was unlatched. "Ephraim," she whispered as loudly as she dared. "Ephraim," the giant's head snapped up, his eyes widening in disbelief as he saw her face at the window. Hope and fear warred in his expression as Amanda carefully pushed the window open wider. "How did you—" he began, but Amanda shushed him. "No time," she breathed, reaching into her bodice to withdraw a metal nail file she had noticed lying on a workbench as she climbed down from the loft. She had grabbed it instinctively, knowing it might prove useful. Now she pressed it through the window bars into Ephraim's shackled hands. "It's not much," she whispered, "but it's something. I'll try to find the keys." A sound from the front of the jail made them both freeze. The guard's chair creaked as he shifted in his sleep. Amanda ducked below the window, heart pounding so hard she was sure it would wake the whole town. After a moment of terrified silence, the guard's snores resumed their steady rhythm. Through the long hours before dawn, the soft scraping of metal against metal filled the jail cell. Ephraim's massive hands worked steadily at the chains, guided by the small nail file Amanda had given him. His muscles burned from the repetitive motion, but he didn't dare stop. In the window above, Amanda kept her vigil, ducking down whenever the guard stirred in his drunken sleep. The eastern sky had just begun to lighten when disaster struck. With a sharp crack, the nail file snapped in two. Ephraim's heart sank as he stared at the broken tool, but when he pulled at the chains, he felt something give. The lock, weakened by hours of sawing, finally surrendered with a quiet click. "It worked," he whispered hoarsely to Amanda's anxious face in the window. The first rays of dawn were creeping over the mountains when Ephraim carefully pushed open his cage door. Each creak of the hinges seemed thunderous in the quiet jail. The guard snorted once but didn't wake. Moving with a stealth that seemed impossible for such a large man, Ephraim made his way to the back window. In one fluid motion, he reached through the bars and lifted Amanda as easily as a father might lift a child. She bit back a surprised squeak as he set her down inside. Together they crept toward the jail's back door, Ephraim leading the way. They had barely stepped outside when a shout split the morning air. "Prisoners escaping! Sound the alarm!" The guard had finally awakened. Within moments, the town erupted into chaos. A bell began to clang frantically as soldiers poured from the barracks, rifles in hand. "Run!" Ephraim commanded, grabbing Amanda's hand. They sprinted for the cover of the trees, bullets kicking up dust at their heels. Amanda struggled to keep up, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Without breaking stride, Ephraim swept her into his arms and lengthened his stride. She wrapped her arms around his neck, pressing her face against his shoulder as more shots rang out behind them. They crashed through underbrush, Ephraim's long legs eating up the distance as they climbed higher into the hills. The sounds of pursuit grew fainter, but he didn't slow his pace. He knew these mountains, knew where the hidden trails lay that few white men had ever seen. The sun climbed higher as they pushed deeper into the wilderness. Ephraim's arms must have been burning from carrying Amanda's weight, but he showed no sign of tiring. Only when they reached a swift-flowing stream did he finally pause, setting her gently on her feet. "Drink," he said gruffly. "We need to keep moving, but you need water first." Amanda cupped her hands in the cold stream, drinking deeply. As she wiped her mouth, movement on the ridge above caught her eye. Her heart seized with fear until she recognized the distinctive features of Apache riders silhouetted against the sky. Ephraim had seen them too. He straightened slowly, raising one hand in greeting. To Amanda's surprise, the lead rider returned the gesture. "I know these men," Ephraim explained quietly. "Traded pelts with them for years before everything changed." The Apache riders approached cautiously, their horses picking their way down the steep slope. The leader, a weathered man with gray streaking his black hair, spoke first in careful English. "Brother of the mountains," he said, addressing Ephraim, "we did not expect to find you here." "Running Bear," Ephraim replied with equal gravity. "We seek sanctuary." The Apache leader's dark eyes moved to Amanda, who stepped forward with surprising boldness despite her torn dress and disheveled appearance. "Please," she said, reaching into her bodice to withdraw the precious deed she had managed to keep hidden. "We have proof that the water rights belong to all of us. If we can break Greeley's dam, both your people and the settlers can share the water as it was meant to be." Running Bear took the document, studying it carefully. A long moment passed while Amanda held her breath. Finally, he looked up and nodded slowly. "The water belongs to no one man," he said. "It should flow free, as the Great Spirit intended." He passed the deed back to Amanda. "We will help you. But first, you must rest. Come." The Apache led them to a hidden canyon where other families had made camp. Women brought Amanda a blanket and some dried meat, while children peeked at her curiously from behind their mother's skirts. As the day waned, Ephraim and Running Bear spoke quietly by the fire, planning their next move. When darkness fell, Amanda found herself sitting beside Ephraim at the edge of the camp. Above them, stars blazed in the vast mountain sky with an intensity she had never seen in town. The night air was cool, and she shivered slightly. Without a word, Ephraim shrugged off his coat and draped it over her shoulders. "Thank you," she said softly. "Not just for the coat, for everything." Ephraim was quiet for so long that Amanda thought he might not respond. When he finally spoke, his deep voice was rough with emotion. "I should be thanking you," he said. "You saved my life back there. More than that." He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. "More than that, you saved my soul. Made me remember what it was to be human again." Amanda felt tears welling up in her eyes. "I just did what anyone would do." "No." Ephraim shook his head. "Most would have left me to hang. But you saw something worth saving, just like your mother must have seen something worth fighting for when she bought those water rights." He turned to look at her then, his scarred face softened by starlight. "I'm proud to call you daughter, if you'll have me as a father." The tears spilled over then, and Amanda buried her face against his chest, sobbing quietly. Ephraim's strong arms came around her, holding her as gently as if she were made of glass. "I never thought," she hiccuped between sobs, "never thought anyone would want me. Not like this. Not as family." "Hush now," Ephraim murmured, his voice gentler than Amanda had ever heard it. "You're my girl, my brave, clever girl, and we're going to face whatever comes together." Above them, a shooting star traced a bright path across the heavens. Amanda made a silent wish, though in truth, Her greatest wish had already come true. She had found her family, unlikely as it might be. As father and daughter sat together under the starlit sky, both knew with bone-deep certainty that their bond was unbreakable. Ephraim began to hum softly, one of the hymns Amanda had taught him in their little cabin. She joined in, their voices blending in the night air. Around them, the Apache camp settled into sleep, while in the distance, coyotes sang their own wild songs to the stars. Dawn broke cold and clear over the mountain peaks. Amanda shivered despite the warmth of Ephraim's borrowed coat as their unusual party made its way down from the hidden canyon. The Apache moved like shadows through the forest, their horses' hooves barely making a sound on the rocky ground. Running Bear led the way, with Ephraim and Amanda close behind. Amanda's heart hammered against her ribs as they drew closer to Greeley's dam. The massive wooden structure loomed ahead, choking the life from the creek that had sustained both settlers and Apache for generations. The sight of it made her fingers tighten on the precious deed tucked safely in her bodice. Ephraim touched her shoulder gently. "Stay close," he murmured. "Whatever happens." They emerged from the tree line into the clearing before the dam. Amanda's breath caught in her throat. Greeley's men were already there, positioned along the top of the structure. Morning sunlight glinted off their rifle barrels. Silas Greeley himself stood at the center, straight-backed and proud in his fine black coat. His thin lips curved into a sneer as he spotted them. Well, he called down. "The giant and his pet have returned, and they've brought savages with them." Running Bear's face remained impassive, but Amanda saw his jaw tighten at the insult. The Apache warriors spread out in a loose half-circle, their own weapons ready but not yet raised. Amanda's legs trembled as she stepped forward, but her voice rang clear across the space between them. "Mr. Greeley," she called, "I've come to claim what's rightfully mine." She pulled out the deed, holding it high so all could see. The paper fluttered in the morning breeze like a flag of truce. "These water rights belong to me," she declared. "My mother bought them fair and square from the territorial office. You've been stealing from us all." Greeley's laugh was sharp and ugly. "Rights?" he spat. "Rights mean nothing without the power to enforce them. And what power do you have, girl? A murderous giant? A band of savages?" He raised his hand, and his men lifted their rifles as one. "I built this dam. The water is mine. And no one," his voice hardened, "no one is going to take it from me." Amanda felt Ephraim tense beside her, ready to throw her behind him at the first sign of gunfire. The morning air crackled with tension. Then, from the other direction, came the sound of hoofbeats. Many hoofbeats. All heads turned to see a crowd of riders emerging from the opposite tree line. The preacher rode at their head, his black coat flapping. Behind him came settlers from the agency, townsfolk, and even a few soldiers who had chosen conscience over orders. "Hold!" The preacher's voice boomed across the clearing. "There will be no bloodshed here today." His horse picked its way down to the creek bed as he spoke. "We've come to demand justice. That dam has brought nothing but suffering to honest folk, red and white alike." Greeley's face twisted with rage. "Justice? The only justice that matters is what a man can take and hold. If you want this dam, you'll have to take it over my dead body." He gestured sharply to his men. "Fire! Fire on any who move." The click of rifle hammers being drawn back echoed through the canyon. Amanda's heart seemed to stop. This was the moment when everything would explode into violence. But then something extraordinary happened. Ephraim Boone, the giant who had struck terror into so many hearts, stepped forward with his massive hands held high and empty. "No," his voice thundered off the canyon walls, deeper and more powerful than Amanda had ever heard it. "I will not kill again." The sheer force of his declaration froze everyone in place. Even Greeley's men hesitated, their fingers on their triggers. "I've spent too many years letting violence rule my heart," Ephraim continued, his words carrying to every ear. "I've seen too much blood spilled over greed and pride. No more." He took another step forward, still keeping his hands raised. "I lay down my arms for mercy's sake, for the sake of the little ones who need clean water, for the sake of every soul here who knows in their heart that this ain't right." Amanda moved to stand beside him, slipping her small hand into his large one. "You've changed," she whispered, tears gleaming in her eyes. The effect of Ephraim's words rippled through both sides of the standoff. She could see it in the way shoulders lowered, in the uncertain glances passed between Greeley's men. The preacher urged his horse forward another few steps. "Listen to him," he called out. "Look around you. Look at what stands before us today. Apache and settler, standing together. The very folk we thought could never find common ground, united by this brave girl's truth and this man's courage to choose peace." Running Bear moved his horse up beside them, speaking in his careful English. "The water flows from the mountains that belong to no man. It was meant to flow free, to give life to all. This is wisdom our fathers knew. This is wisdom we must remember." More riders were appearing now, Apache families from other camps, drawn by word of what was happening. They gathered silently along the ridge, watching. Among them, Amanda spotted women carrying children, elders leaning on staffs, young ones peering wide-eyed at the scene below. The sight seemed to affect Greeley's men more than any words had. One by one, their rifle barrels began to lower. "Hold your positions!" Greeley shrieked, his composure finally cracking. "I'll have you all shot for desertion." But his men were already backing away from him, their faces showing the shame of what they'd nearly done. Several dropped their rifles entirely, letting them clatter onto the wooden planks of the dam. The preacher raised his voice one final time. "The law is clear, Mr. Greeley. That deed is legal and binding. The water rights belong to Amanda May. Will you respect that law, or shall we send for the federal marshal?" Greeley looked wildly around him, seeing his support crumbling away. His face contorted with rage and something else. Fear. The fear of a man watching his power slip through his fingers like water. With a wordless cry of fury, he yanked a pistol from his coat. But before he could aim it, 3 of his own men grabbed him, wrestling him to his knees. "We've had enough of your greed," one of them growled. "Enough of being paid to hurt honest folk." A great cheer went up from the gathered crowd. Amanda felt tears streaming down her face as she squeezed Ephraim's hand. He squeezed back gently, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "You did it, girl," he said softly. "You showed us all a better way." "We did it together," she corrected him. "You showed just as much courage, laying down your arms like that." Running Bear dismounted and approached them, holding out his hand to Ephraim. "Brother of the mountains," he said solemnly, "you have proven yourself a true warrior today. The greatest battle is not with enemies, but with one's own heart." Ephraim clasped his arm in the Apache way, bowing his head in acknowledgement of the honor being paid him. The preacher was organizing men to begin dismantling the dam, while others led Greeley away to face justice at last. Apache and settlers worked side by side, passing tools back and forth, sharing water from canteens as the morning sun climbed higher. Amanda stood watching it all, her mother's deed clutched tight against her heart. She felt Ephraim's strong hand on her shoulder and leaned into his solid presence, knowing that whatever came next, they would face it as father and daughter, their unlikely family bound by something stronger than blood, the courage to choose mercy over vengeance and hope over fear. The morning sunlight glinted off rifle barrels as the standoff reached its tipping point. Settlers who had ridden in with the preacher began dismounting, moving to stand shoulder to shoulder with the Apache warriors. Women and children emerged from the tree line, carrying water jugs and baskets, a silent reminder of who truly suffered from the dam's greed. Greeley's men shifted uneasily, looking from face to face in the growing crowd. These were their neighbors, people they saw at church and trading posts, people whose children played together. The weight of what they had been ordered to do pressed heavy on their consciences. "Lower your weapons," the preacher called out, his voice carrying across the morning air. "Look around you. Is this what you want your children to remember? That their fathers chose to shoot their neighbors over a rich man's greed?" One by one, rifles lowered. Several of Greeley's men stepped back, then turned to walk away entirely. Others simply stood silent, heads bowed in shame. Amanda felt hope rising, in her chest like a spring. She squeezed Ephraim's massive hand, feeling his answering pressure. They had done it. Without bloodshed, they had won. "The dam comes down today," Ephraim announced, his deep voice rolling across the gathering. "Any man willing to work is welcome to help." Settlers and Apache warriors alike moved forward, carrying axes, sledgehammers, and coils of rope. A wagon rattled up loaded with dynamite from the mining camp, carefully packed in sawdust. "We'll need to place the charges just right," said Running Bear, who had worked in the silver mines. "Too much force could bring down the whole canyon wall. Too little won't break the main supports." Ephraim nodded, already studying the dam's construction. "We'll start with the axes, weaken the cross bracing, then set the charges where they'll do the most good." The work began under the rising Sunday. The sound of axes biting into wood echoed off the canyon walls. Amanda helped where she could, carrying water to the workers, holding ropes steady as men climbed across the face of the dam. Her heart swelled watching Apache and settler working side by side, passing tools back and forth, sharing canteens and advice. The morning wore on. Sweat gleamed on backs bent to the task. The dam's wooden bones began to splinter and crack. By noon, deep grooves had been cut into the crucial support beams, and Running Bear declared it time to set the charges. "Everyone back," Ephraim bellowed. "Clear the creek bed." The workers scrambled up the banks, taking shelter behind boulders and trees. Running Bear carefully laid out the dynamite fuse, checking it twice before nodding to Ephraim. "Fire in the hole!" The warning call echoed up and down the canyon. Amanda pressed her hands over her ears, heart hammering with anticipation. The explosion was deafening, a thunderclap that shook the ground. Splinters of wood and chunks of earth flew skyward. For a moment, dust and smoke obscured everything. Then came a sound Amanda would never forget, the roar of imprisoned water breaking free. Through gaps in the ruined dam, the creek burst forth in silvery torrents. The remaining structure groaned, swayed, and finally collapsed with a mighty crash. The freed water rushed downstream, filling the parched creek bed, where dust and stones had lain baking in the sun. Clear water now danced and sparkled. The roar of its passage slowly settled into the familiar music of a healthy stream. Children were the first to respond. They ran whooping down to the water's edge, splashing through the shallows, their laughter mixing with the sound of the flowing creek. Apache mothers filled their water jugs while settler women dabbed wet handkerchiefs to their faces, tears mingling with the cool drops. Amanda made her way down to the creek's edge, her legs shaking with emotion. She knelt and dipped her hands into the flowing water. It felt cool and clean, like her mother's touch on her forehead when she had been sick. Tears streamed down her face as she thought of how proud her mother would be to see this day. Ephraim's huge form knelt beside her, his scarred hands joining hers in the water. To Amanda's amazement, she saw tears in his eyes too as he whispered rough words of thanks to God. This man who had known so much violence was weeping at the sight of water flowing free. "Thank you," she whispered, leaning against his solid strength. "For everything." He wrapped one wet hand around her shoulders, pulling her close. "No, daughter. Thank you for showing an old killer there was another way." Behind them, soldiers were leading Greeley away in irons. The land baron's fine coat was dirty now, his carefully trimmed mustache drooping as he was helped onto a horse for the ride to the fort where he would await trial. His former men wouldn't meet his eyes as he passed. As the afternoon mellowed toward evening, people began gathering along the creek banks. Lanterns were lit and hung from tree branches, casting warm light on the flowing water. The Apache women brought out bread and dried meat, while settler families contributed pies and preserves. Children darted between the adults, playing games that needed no translation between cultures. Amanda watched it all from her perch on a sun-warmed boulder, marveling at how naturally everyone mixed together now that the artificial barriers of fear and greed had been washed away. The water had done what no amount of preaching or politics could. It had reminded everyone of their common humanity. A hand touched her shoulder. It was the preacher, his kind eyes twinkling in the lantern light. "Would you sing for us, child? Something to mark this blessed day?" Amanda felt her throat tighten with nervousness. But then Ephraim was there, offering his hand to help her stand. She smiled up at him, drawing courage from his presence. She chose one of her mother's favorite hymns, one about springs in the desert and God's provision. Her voice lifted clear and true in the evening air, echoing softly off the canyon walls. One by one, other voices joined in, settler women who knew the hymn, Apache mothers humming the melody, children picking up the simple chorus. The music rose and fell like the water itself, weaving together English words and Apache harmonies into something new and beautiful. Amanda felt tears on her cheeks again, but they were tears of joy. As she sang, she watched the creek flowing past, its waters catching the golden light of sunset and the silver gleam of rising stars. The water was free again, just as God and nature had intended, and with it, hearts had been freed as well, freed from hatred and fear, freed to recognize the humanity in each other. Amanda's voice soared on the chorus, carried by the voices of her new family, Apache and settler, young and old, all celebrating together beside the liberated stream. In that moment, as lantern light danced on the moving water and the hymn echoed off the canyon walls, Amanda felt her mother's presence as strongly as if she stood beside her. She knew that somewhere, somehow, her mother was smiling down on this scene, this miracle of mercy and justice that had grown from the simple gift of a water deed and the courage to stand up for what was right. The water flowed on, carrying their song toward tomorrow. Sawdust filled the air as Ephraim's axe bit through another log. The rhythmic thud of his work blended with children's voices singing nearby, where Amanda sat teaching Apache youngsters Amazing Grace in the shade of a cottonwood tree. Her clear voice guided them through the verses, patient when they stumbled over English words. All around them, the community worked to rebuild what Greeley's men had destroyed. Men raised new walls while women hung quilts to air and arranged donated furniture. The smell of fresh-baked bread wafted from temporary outdoor ovens, where settler women worked alongside Apache mothers, sharing recipes and stories. When Sunday came, the rebuilt church filled with both settlers and Apache families. Amanda sat beside Ephraim in the back pew, feeling his tension as the preacher approached the pulpit. But instead of the condemnation Ephraim feared, the preacher's words rang with welcome. "Brother Ephraim," he called out, "would you come forward?" Ephraim hesitated until Amanda squeezed his hand. He rose, his giant frame casting a shadow as he walked down the aisle. "This man," the preacher declared, "chose mercy over vengeance. He showed us all a better path." Turning to Ephraim, he extended his hand. "We welcome you into our fellowship, brother." Tears gleamed in Ephraim's eyes as he clasped the preacher's hand. Amanda wiped her own eyes, whispering, "They don't fear you anymore. They see what I see." That evening, as sunset painted the creek gold, Ephraim walked alone to the water's edge. Amanda watched from a distance as he knelt in the shallows, submerging himself in the flowing water. When he rose, water, streaming from his beard, his face shone with peace. "You gave me back my soul, daughter," he said simply when she joined him. "You showed me I could be more than my past." Winter settled over the valley like a soft blanket, transforming the landscape into a pristine white wonderland. Inside their rebuilt line shack, Amanda May sat by the window, threading her needle through checkered fabric that would soon become curtains. The cabin, once bare and cold, now glowed with warmth from the pot-bellied stove and the golden light of oil lamps. Ephraim's large hands, once known only for their strength, now moved with surprising gentleness as he carved intricate details into a wooden cross. Wood shavings curled at his feet while he worked, his face peaceful in concentration. The cross would soon grace their mantle, a symbol of their shared faith and new beginning. Hardly a day passed without visitors. Children's laughter, once foreign to these walls, now rang through the cabin as young ones gathered to hear Ephraim's tales of mountain life. He taught them to read animal tracks in the snow and spot the best hunting grounds, his gruff voice softening as he shared the wisdom of the wilderness. When Christmas arrived, Amanda's voice lifted in carols, stronger and more confident than ever. Apache families and settlers crowded into their cabin, joining her song. The harmony of different languages and traditions blended beautifully, healing old wounds with each shared melody. The changes in both of them were clear to all. Ephraim, the feared giant who once skulked in shadows, now stood tall among his neighbors, respected and trusted. Amanda, no longer the target of cruel taunts, had blossomed into a beloved teacher and daughter of the community. Her warm smile and kind heart drew people together, bridging gaps between cultures. Their little cabin had become more than just shelter. It was the heart of their renewed community, where all were welcome and none went hungry. The bond between father and daughter grew stronger with each passing day, anchoring not just their own lives, but the unity of their entire valley. Dawn painted the Colorado sky in gentle brushstrokes of pink and gold, casting its soft light over the valley below. Ice crystals rimmed the creek banks like delicate lace, glinting in the early morning sunday. The water ran strong and clear beneath the crystalline edges, a testament to the freedom they had fought so hard to win. Amanda May knelt by the creek's edge, her woolen skirts gathered carefully around her. Steam rose from her breath in the crisp morning air as she dipped a wooden bucket into the flowing water. Her cheeks glowed rosy from the cold, but her eyes sparkled with contentment. She had found her place here, by these waters that her mother had secured for all. Nearby, Ephraim Boone's mighty axe rose and fell in steady rhythm. The sharp crack of splitting wood echoed through the valley as he prepared their daily supply of firewood. Every few swings, he would pause, resting his hands on the axe handle, to watch Amanda with unmistakable fatherly pride. The fearsome giant of legend had transformed into something else entirely. A protector, a teacher, a father. Inside their snug cabin, a cheerful fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the wooden cross Ephraim had carved. Their mother's hymn book lay open on the rough-hewn table, its pages worn smooth with daily use. The morning light streaming through Amanda's checkered curtains made the humble space feel like a sanctuary. Amanda's voice rose clear and sweet in the morning air, beginning the hymn her mother had taught her so long ago. The familiar words floated out across the valley. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Without hesitation, Ephraim's deep voice joined hers, steady and sure where once it had been hesitant. Their voices twined together in perfect harmony, father and daughter bound not by blood but by something deeper, by choice, by faith, by love that had grown in the most unlikely soil. The sound of their song carried across the valley, touching every corner of their world. It echoed off the canyon walls where they had once fled for their lives, drifted over the trading post where they had first faced scorn together, floated past the church where Ephraim had found his redemption. The music spoke of their journey, from outcast to beloved, from feared to respected, from broken to whole. The creek flowed steadily beneath the morning sun, its waters bringing life to all who drew from it, settler and Apache alike. Its constant motion seemed to whisper of God's endless mercy, of second chances freely given, of love that could bridge any divide. Here stood the proof, a once feared mountain man and a once mocked orphan girl, transformed by grace into a family, their redemption as real as the water flowing at their feet. Their song finished, and Amanda rose from the creek's edge, bucket full. Ephraim set down his axe and moved to help her carry the water inside. Together, they walked toward their cabin, father and daughter, their footsteps sure upon the path that love had made. Thank you for listening. Stories connect us in the most unexpected ways. If you felt that spark today, make sure you're subscribed. I share a new one daily, and the next might change your day.